Coming up, SpaceX launches and tries to land a Falcon 9 rocket.
We get a little bit of information from Blue Origin.
And NASA has some moon buggy challenges.
Plus, we've got a live interview with John Thornton, the CEO of Astrobotic. Stay tuned! Tomorrow begins right now. And welcome to tomorrow, episode 8.12 for Saturday. What is this? April 18th, 2015. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham, and I'd like to thank all of our patrons of tomorrow who helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. Patrons are the people who've contributed $10 or more to this specific episode. We are a crowd-funded show, and every single dollar helps. You can find out more information over at patreon.com/TMRO. And as a special thank you to all of our patrons, we haven't actually announced this yet. This will be the last time we do the show from this particular location. We will be moving next week, and we'll be posting images on our Patreon channel for all of our patrons so you can see what the status of the new set is and all that other fun jazz. All right, let's go ahead and get straight into it. We've got John Thornton, who is the CEO of Astrobotic, joining us today. John, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about who Astrobotic is.
Oh, thanks for having me here today. Astrobotic is, we're a lunar logistics company. So we're like a UPS or FedEx to the moon. We take packages from around the world, we bolt them up on our lander, which is our delivery truck, and we deliver them to the moon. There's 3 destinations on the way. It's first to translunar injection, which is being thrown towards the moon. The second is to lunar orbit, and the third and final destination is going all the way down to the surface.
Now, you're also a Google Lunar XPrize competitive team, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So this is all part of the Google Lunar XPrize. That was the catalyst for our team to get started. And we've turned that into a sustainable operating business where we regularly fly to the surface of the moon. So what we do with the XPrize is very unique. We're actually offering other prize contenders to come and fly with us to the surface. So that means that we share the cost to get there, and then we share the reward on the back end. And that allows that for every team to fly with us and compete and actually have a contest on the surface of the moon. So we'll be releasing multiple rovers on the surface at the same time, and it will be almost like a NASCAR or Formula One like race happening live on the surface of the moon for the world to see.
That sounds pretty awesome. Now, I know most of our audience is very versed in space and happenings and whatnot, but could you describe really quickly for maybe anyone who doesn't know, what is the Google Lunar XPrize?
Sure. Yeah, the Google Lunar XPrize is a $30 million prize to be the first to land on the moon and drive 500 meters. So it's the largest prize ever, and whoever can do that first gets 30 million. The biggest challenge with it, though, is that it costs a lot more than 30 million to actually get there. So it comes down to teams that have the unique capability to build a business and do the fundraising that are going to be successful.
So you're a Google Lunar XPrize team. You're trying to get that $30 million prize money, but it sounds like you're doing more than just the Google Lunar XPrize. It sounds like you're kind of trying to create a business plan around the moon in and of itself. You've got a bunch of different programs going. You've got your Griffin lander, you've got Moon Mail, you've got another program called Lunar Skylight. Can we talk a little bit about some of those things and some of those other things that you've got going on? I think it feels like they all tie to the Google Lunar XPrize, but they're also independent of the Google Lunar XPrize.
That's right. Yeah, we've got a whole array of programs that are going on right now, all toward creating a sustainable, long-term business of flying regular packages to the moon. So the Google XPrize is really our catalyst to get started. What we think is one of the biggest markets for this is international space agencies and people that haven't been able to land on the moon before. If you think about it, there's only been 3 nations that have ever landed on the moon. It's the US, the former Soviets, and just recently China. So what our goal is to make it possible for every nation around the world to land on the moon. And for that purpose, we've built a lander, which is called Griffin, and Griffin is our delivery system. So this is the lander that's going to actually land on the surface of the moon. So this vehicle, as shown here, is what gets thrown towards the moon aboard a Falcon 9 launch vehicle. It's a 200-foot tall, million-pound force thrust vehicle, and throws this landing craft towards the surface of the moon. And this lander is our delivery truck. So payloads bolt on here. Rovers bolt on here, satellites will bolt on here, science and exploration payloads will bolt on here. And this, once we land on the surface of the moon, this becomes a power station and a communication station to back home. So this will be the local utility on the surface of the moon for payloads that are going to come with us to the surface. Our first destination on the moon is a place called Lacus Mortis, which translates to Lake of Death, which sounds very dramatic. But
I would not want to go there.
Yeah, the reason that we go there, though, is a good one. There's a feature there called a skylight, and it's there's upwards of 300 of these that they have found on the surface of the moon so far. And what these things are is they're on order of 100 meters across and 100 meters deep. And it's thought that if you can get to the bottom of one of these skylights, that it could be an entrance to a cave underneath the surface of the moon. So this one particular location at Lacus Mortis, the walls of the skylight have actually collapsed, creating a natural ramp. So potentially you could drive down or maybe someday walk down the ramp and enter a cave under the surface of the moon. And you might ask, why do we care about caves on the moon? So caves provide natural protection from all of the elements on the surface of the moon. There's radiation that comes from the sun. There's no magnetic sphere around the moon that protects you like we are protected here on Earth. There's also micrometeorites that come flying through at orbital velocity down to the surface. So what we see as beautiful things in the night sky, giving us a nice night show, a light show. When you're on the surface of the moon, that's not so pretty. You definitely don't want to have meteorites coming down at you at orbital velocity. And then the third is that it's a very hot place on the moon and also very cold. So that at night, the lit part of the moon, the part that we see up in the sky at night, that can get up to 120 degrees Celsius or upwards of 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And at night, when the sun sets on the moon, it's minus 180 degrees Celsius, which is liquid nitrogen cold. So it's a really, really, really tough environment. And if we can find a natural shelter location like these caves on the surface of the moon, it could one day be a place where people settle on the surface. So that's why we go to Lacus Mortis. And if we go and if we find a cave, we're going to need to rename the place to the Lake of Life, where someday humanity can start on the moon.
Because I don't want to live there. Just the name alone, that sounds scary, like a place I just would not want to go. But that brings up a valid point. There are potentially these tunnels and caves on the moon that humans can go down into, potentially. And so what you're talking about is basically robotic exploration of those areas prior to a human mission to make sure that, you know, this actually does work, how much radiation shielding is there, and do these exist, you know, at all, right? Because it's all kind of theory right now. We've never actually proven that they're there.
That's right. That's right. So our best theory comes from imagery from orbit. So the very first time that the caves were thought to be discovered was actually by a Japanese spacecraft called Kaguya. And it took imagery of the moon. And what they noticed in some of the images is that it looked like some of the terrain was actually moving under the camera. And what was happening was that they were looking down into a pit. And the pit was, the floor of the pit was actually changing the terrain that you could see because of the viewing angles. So it was first discovered by a satellite, and we've only ever seen these entrances from orbit. So we've never been down on the moon up close to see inside and to see if it actually could be an entrance to a cave. So there's a lot of exploration to be done, and that's why we go to Lacus Mortis to see if we can find an entryway. And we also don't even know how these features came to exist on the surface. There's a couple theories, and they're similar to how the same kind of features exist here on Earth. One is that it could be lava flows underneath the surface that eventually emptied out. So they formed lava tubes underneath the surface. And another could be an impact melt. So if you have a big giant impact that happens on the moon, you get a lot of lava. And it's possible that you get some gases and air pockets inside that formed a cave over a long time. So we actually don't even know the fundamental formations. So there's a lot of exploration and discovery that needs to happen to figure out if we can one day settle inside of these caves.
So a question from Serenity SLS in our chat room asks, how do you plan on actually finding the caves? You have a rough idea as to where they are already, but then extending on that question, if you're going to drive into one of these caves, there's a possibility you're going to lose radio communication with your rovers. So will this be autonomous? So how are you going to deal with a potential blackout where the rover is okay, but you can't communicate with it?
Great question. So first, how do you find a cave on the moon? So the way we've discovered them so far is by looking at orbital imagery. If you can imagine a vertically shaped pit on the surface of the moon, and think of it like a shaft of light that goes down. And as you fly over that shaft at different angles, you can actually see the bottom of the pit moving a little bit with the different angles. So by using a computer vision technique and a whole series of imagery from Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and also the Kaguya spacecraft, we've been able to identify upwards of 300 possible locations of cave entrances where it's thought that there's an overhang that exists underneath the terrain. So they're just candidate locations for entrances to a cave. We don't actually know because we've never been up close. And we can only find these caves so far between 45 degrees north and 45 degrees south, so the middle section of the moon. Because if you get too close to the poles, the caves are just dark. There's no light that goes into them, so there's no way to tell if it's an entrance to a cave or just a deep crater. So once we've identified a possible cave location and a potential entrance, then we need to figure out how to get inside of them. Most of these pits and caves are vertical. They're almost like the sinkholes that you occasionally see on the news in Florida or South American countries, where it's just they pop up and it's just straight down. So you'd either have to jump or rappel to get down inside of it. But there's a smaller number of them where the walls of the edges have collapsed, and our hope is that that collapse hasn't filled in the cave the whole way, but has in fact created a natural ramp to potentially drive down and get inside. And as your question mentioned, we will lose communication once we get deep inside of the cave. It's possible we could set up relays along the way. It's also possible that we could have an autonomous rover that can drive deep into the cave. Our partner, Carnegie Mellon University, has developed over many decades the capability to have a vehicle that can drive kilometers into a cave and come back out fully autonomous and give you a data dump of what it discovered inside of it.
So could you also use the Griffin lander as almost a relay point then? I think you mentioned that in the beginning. So you kind of have the Griffin lander near where you need to be. Your rover goes off Griffin. I assume that's the plan at least, right? The rover isn't part of Griffin, correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So as you say, the lander is the main communication hub. So that's you can think of it like our cell tower. So that's communicating back home to Earth, and then we have a local Wi-Fi, and it's literally 802.11 Wi-Fi, and then you have rovers that are in the vicinity of the lander, and we have a mesh network of radios on the rovers. So it's possible that you could string multiple rovers out across a distance and potentially down into the pit to keep line of sight, radio to radio to radio, to get all of that communication back home.
And the nice thing about being on the moon, at least right now, is that there's not a whole lot of Wi-Fi interference from other Wi-Fi hotspots. So you can use whatever channel you want when you're up on the moon.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible.
So I had another question, which was with regard to the Griffin lander. I don't remember who asked it. I'm sorry. Whoever asked this question, I'm sorry. But the gist of it was, how long do you expect it to survive on the surface of the moon? When you land, what's its life at that point?
That's a great question. So the moon is a really tough, challenging environment. It's a 28-day cycle on the surface of the moon. It's 14 days of light and 14 days of dark. We will land at about a day and a half or two after local sunrise. So that means that we'll have 12 days on the surface of the moon before the sun sets. During that entire time, we'll be operating off of solar power. But once the sun goes down, there's 14 days of liquid nitrogen cold temperature. It's a very, very, very challenging environment to survive in. So it's one that we don't guarantee to come up the next day after. It's possible that our battery could freeze. It's possible that electronics could freeze. We could pop a solder joint. All kinds of problems can happen when you bring it down to that cold temperature. But we are creating systems over longer time that can survive that hibernating temperature and come back up the next day. And one of the first discoveries we've made towards that is a battery that you can put into liquid nitrogen and bring back out back up to room temperature, and it still has the same charge as it had when it went down. So it's a first big step toward surviving the night over a long time. Now that's our commercial approach to surviving the night. Historically, governments actually use a radioisotope to keep their rovers warm through the course of the night. So that the Chinese had one of these, the Soviet rover Lunokhod had one of these, and the way that works is you have an isotope that's attached to the rover, and that isotope is always hot. So by simply turning a fan on at night and circulating a local atmosphere that they had inside of the rover, the Soviets were able to keep their rover warm all the way through the night and hibernate that way. So the reason we don't do that is as a commercial outfit, it's very hard to get radioactive material, and then you literally have to get presidential approval to launch that into space. So it's a tremendous expense, tremendous program challenge, and one that we don't think is very viable for a commercial company.
I would say near impossible to get a radioactive material on a private spacecraft going to the moon. That doesn't seem like anything other than governments would be able to do. So you've got your Griffin lander, you've got your rovers, and actually someone asked in the chat room, Space Mike actually, our own Space Mike, what happened to the Pyramid rover? Is that still a thing? We actually saw a video of it earlier.
Yeah, so there's a few different configurations of rovers, and they're all designed for different scale and also different destinations on the moon. So there was a Pyramid rover that I think was shown a little bit earlier. This is designed for the equator of the moon. So this is right around the 0 point of the moon. So this is where the sun, this is the one right here. This is designed to have the sun traverse directly over the top of the rover. So those solar panels, as you saw, are optimized to get the most power through the whole course of the day, while also maintaining cool temperatures. And as you get closer and closer to the poles of the moon, the solar panel angle has to change. And the relative amount of radiator to solar panel has to change. So that's why you see slight differences in configurations of rovers. So we have one rover that will fly on our first mission that Carnegie Mellon is developing, and this one's called Andy. This is smaller than the rover that we just saw a couple of minutes ago. And that one's designed to go to 45 degrees north, which is where this pit is. So it's a little bit, it's not quite as hot as it is on the equator. The sun is a little bit lower in the sky as compared with the equator. And as such, the rover is slightly designed a little bit different in terms of the solar angle and also the radiator angle on the lander. So the rover, Andy, actually deploys from the bottom of the lander deck and drops directly down to the surface of the moon. So that's why there's a few different rovers and a few different scales there.
Do your other rovers have names as well? Do you have those like kind of set out at this point?
Yes. So the Pyramid rover that we saw is Red Rover. Andy is the one that will fly on mission 1. And then mission 2, actually our second destination on the moon is going to the pole of the moon, where we're going to drill for water. And we'll send a rover called Polaris, fittingly, to the pole of the moon. And the idea with Polaris is that it will drill for water at the pole of the moon. So it's going to have a coring drill that will go down upwards to about a meter below the surface, take that sample up, drop it into an oven, and analyze what we find there. So it will heat up the sample and we'll look for volatiles like water, methane, and other gaseous materials that come off of out of the regolith.
So the dreaded question in aerospace is when, like how real is it, and how much?
Yeah, good questions, and that's so we're making really great progress toward mission 1. We've got 5 deals in place already for mission 1. We've got 3 imminent deals towards mission 1 as well. So these will be announced over the course of the next few months. And right now we're filling the manifest. So we're out selling payloads and gathering people together to fly on our mission. And as soon as the manifest is full, that's when we fly. We currently anticipate being able to fill the flight and fly by towards the very end of 2016. But as any space mission goes, it really comes down to the customers and making sure that the payloads are aligned to fly. In terms of total price, all I can point you to is the pricing that we have on our website to give you a sense of scale. It's certainly not a cheap it's not a cheap endeavor, and it's going to take large amounts of money to make it go. But we don't put specific numbers out to the public.
Well, it's all point of reference, right? So when you're talking about billion-dollar programs to Mars and to the moon and whatnot, your endeavors are much, much less expensive than that. You know, you're, I assume, in millions of dollars, not billions of dollars.
Yes, we're in the tens to single digit hundred millions kind of category. So it's much smaller than a Mars mission. And the key to our mission and the key to our service offering is our dollar per kilogram that we offer for payloads to fly with us. So it starts at $500,000 per pound, which might sound expensive to you and I, but to space agencies around the world and corporations around the world, this is the cheapest it's ever been to get all the way to the surface of the moon. So an emerging space nation or a corporation or even a marketing group that wants to actually fly something for real to the surface of the moon can do it for the very first time and buy a piece of the mission. Traditionally, what would happen here is if you're a scientist, you have to convince your science community that you have the best science out of your entire community. And then you have to go to your local space agency, maybe NASA, and convince them to spend $300 million to fly to the surface of the moon and perform your experiment. And that happens so infrequently because of the amount of money, because of the challenge of convincing people that you have the best science, that's why we don't see a lot of flights to the moon and also into deep space. But with our service model, we can have many different small experiments from scientists around the world regularly performing real science and exploration on the surface of the moon through the course of every single mission.
You talked about that battery, and we kind of glossed over it, but that seems like a pretty big deal, actually. Is that technology you'll be able to sell to other private space companies to help them in the future? Because power in space is hard if you're not using an isotope. Is that kind of some of your core IP, or is that just kind of a cool accidental discovery?
It is something that we have found. It is part of our core IP, and we are developing a whole array of robotic space technology that can really push the bounds of what's possible in space. Sometimes we think about ourselves as a space robotics company. We have a good number of people on our staff come directly from Carnegie Mellon's Robotics Institute. And some, in fact, created the first autonomous cars that competed in the DARPA Urban Challenge. So we're taking this cutting edge robotics and putting it right into our lander. And it's really changing the face of how you do science and exploration and landings on the surface of the moon. So we're taking cutting edge computing capability and cutting edge vision techniques and hazard avoidance techniques and applying that in a really brand new way in space.
How will this inspire people? I think there's like high-def feeds that you're bringing back from the lander. What other elements can you use to inspire people to get excited about exploration of the cosmos again?
Well, going to the moon is a very important thing for humanity, and there's a big drive and need inside, I think, of many people to push humanity's bounds. If we always stay earthbound and if we always look down, then we're not expanding our creativity, not expanding our human footprint. Some day we need to reach beyond Earth and Mars, and the moon is a stepping stone to Mars. The moon is our own backyard. We need to learn to live and operate on the moon, and then we need to take that technology and know-how and eventually settle Mars and push humanity further and further into space. There's huge benefits that the moon can have in terms of resources in the near term. It could become a fueling station. It could become a place for science and exploration and for a human base on the surface to discover deep space and look beyond. So there's a huge amount of things that are really important that happen in the moon. And what's really cool is you can look up in the night sky and see it. You can see the destination that we're going to. So the way we're inspiring people is telling that story and showing how it's so important to land on the moon and why it's really pushing humanity out into the cosmos. And then we're holding that race on the surface of the moon, so it's like a NASCAR Formula One style race. And then we're potentially discovering an entrance to a cave under the surface. So we're holding a Formula One style race. We're finding shelter on the moon for the future of humanity. And mission 2 will find water. So we're going after the fundamental building blocks of life beyond Earth.
Citizen 16 asks, quote, I've read about the landing capabilities of the Griffin lander and how it can land within 100 meters of its intended target. Could you talk about the significance of this capability?
Sure. Yeah, it's so that's our precision landing capability for the Griffin lander. So we can land within 100 meters of any target on the surface of the moon that's lit. And the reason that is so important is that if you have a base on the surface of the moon, for example, you don't want to land on top of your own base. You also don't want to land kilometers and kilometers away from it. You want to have a precise landing in a location that's going to keep your habitat safe. The other is if you want to go to a specific location, like a cave on the surface of the moon, you want to be able to land and navigate directly to that cave in very short time. So having that capability for precise landing is very important for science and exploration, and one day very important for settling the surface of the moon.
And speaking of locations, Citizen Kane asks, are you planning on going to other locations in the solar system?
So right now we're focusing on the moon, and we see that as a stepping stone to other destinations beyond. So for the moment, we're keeping our focus on the moon, and we think that there's a lot yet to learn there that could one day lead us to Mars and other destinations beyond.
What if I want to send something up there? I think you have a program called Moon Mail. Can you talk about that a little bit?
That's right. Yeah. So it's a very first program of its kind. Where individuals can send, for a few $100s, can send a memento or keepsake to the surface of the moon. It's the very first time that an individual can send something to the surface, and we've actually seen some really amazing stories of people that want to send something that's really meaningful and important to them. So we have some people commemorating weddings that way. Some people commemorating relationships even with their family pets. We had one story that's really touched the heartstrings. It was an Iraq war veteran who, when he was fighting in Iraq, would write letters back and forth to his mom back here on Earth. And every time his mom would sign a letter, she would always say, you know, I love you to the moon and back. And I'm always looking down at you from the surface of the moon. And unfortunately, when that soldier came back home, his mom passed away from stage 4 cancer. So he had a locket made that he keeps around his neck with a little bit of her ashes inside of it. And he wants to send that locket to the surface of the moon so that he will always be reminded that his mom is looking down on him. So it's just an example of the amazing stories and the connections that people have with the moon. And Moon Mail, for the first time, allows people from around the world to have that connection realized in a way that's permanent and forever on the surface.
That's actually an amazing story. So if other people have stories and they want to send something to the moon, what do they do? How do they do it?
Sure. So the way you send something to the moon is you log on the website moonmail.co. And you pick what size item that you'd like to send. And then a few weeks later, our Moon Mail kit will arrive in the mail, and you can put your memento inside of it, send it back to us. We'll take pictures of it through the course of integration and process towards flight. And then once we land on the moon, it will be forever there on the surface of the moon as a time capsule for future archaeologists and people in long time to discover it and reach back to our time and understand what it was like in life right now.
I just pictured a scene out of 2001: A Space Odyssey for some reason when you said that. Yeah. So what is one of your largest roadblocks right now? What's keeping you firmly planted on Earth and not going towards the moon?
Well, one of the big challenges is actually convincing people that this is possible. There's a lot of built-up ideas that space is a place for people in white lab coats, and you have to be a rocket scientist to go and do it. It's just simply not true. And people need to start to believe that it's possible to go to the moon privately and commercially and regularly. The technology is all there. This can be done regularly, routinely, and it's really changing people's perceptions about it. And that's, I think, what drives the Google XPrize and why they got started in the first place to try to change that perception about the moon. So really, that's one of the biggest challenges. is changing the entire world and showing them that you don't need to be a superpower to land on the moon. We can do it as individuals together. We can do it as a corporation. We can do it with small countries around the world and bring all of these people together and fly missions at scales that have never been possible, at price points that have never been possible. And it's here today. And we're proving it by the payloads that we're signing every day. And we're proving it with the technology demonstrations that we're showing towards it. So that really is our single biggest challenge is convincing the world that this new paradigm is ready, it's here, and it's possible.
With that said, is there something that the citizens of tomorrow can do to help change perceptions of people out there, to let them know that, yes, this is a real thing that's happening right now?
Well, the best thing that everyone can do is tell our story. Tell people that payloads are signing up, that people are signing up. Individuals around the world are coming together to say, you know, we're going to do this. We're going to get together and fly to the moon. And it's possible. The technology is here now. And I think it's about telling your neighbors, telling your friends, and starting to change that perception. Space is a place where all of us can play, and it needs to be accessible. And we're doing that starting with the moon.
Awesome. John, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday. Where can people go for more information on you and Astrobotic?
For more information on Astrobotic, you can log on to astrobotic.com and check us out and read all about us. We also have a YouTube channel on YouTube. And then again, if you'd like to tell your friends or send moon mail yourself, you can log on to moonmail.co, moonmail.co. And sends a package to the surface of the moon. And thank you so much for having me and telling our story.
Great. It's been fantastic. Best of luck to you in the future. Don't be a stranger. As you get closer to doing these things, I hope you can come back on, show us what you're doing, and help get the world excited about traveling through the cosmos.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, space news. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Tomorrow. I'm joined by CARIANN, HIGGINBOTHAM, and soon Michael Clark, who will be our Falcon, SpaceX, ULA, all things awesome correspondent. That needs to be his banner in future weeks. That's going to say on the bottom. And before we get into space news, I did want to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who have contributed $5 or more to this specific episode. You can find out more information on how you can help to crowdfund the show over at patreon.com/TMRO. As always, thank you, all of you. And we're bringing Space Mike on just about right away here. He runs our Space Pod area. We have 2 Patreon campaigns going on. One for these live shows. So if you enjoy these live shows, contribute to that. We do about 4 of those per month. And then we've also got a new Patreon campaign specifically to the Space Pods. And those that we do they cost less per episode, but we do about 20 of those per month. So we do quite a few more of those. And you can get more information on that over at patreon.com/spacepod. We'll start putting those name banners and whatnot in after we get through 1 month worth of shows. So, all right, Space Mike, take us away. You have some epic coverage.
Oh yeah, so SpaceX was able to launch a Falcon 9 rocket. This was the 17th Falcon 9 rocket, and it was launching the Dragon capsule for the CRS mission, the Commercial Resupplies mission. And on this mission, they had tons of supplies and hardware and even some personal items for the astronauts, but they also had some really cool payloads, such as the Arcid 3 for planetary resources. Here's some video of the launch right here. The Arcid 3 for planetary resources is a technology demonstrator testing out the technologies they're using on their Orchid 100 series of spacecraft. And just as a reminder, those are orbital telescopes that will be able to be available for public use. The other constellation of satellites they were bringing up there was a bunch of CubeSats, 14 of them for Planet Labs. And these are Earth imaging satellites that would be able to give updated data for all sorts of different purposes for Earth imaging. And so that was really cool that they were able to tag along all those CubeSats, and they're going to be launched from the Kibo module on the International Space Station. And something that was really cool, but it's up to your opinion if you think it's a partial failure or partial success. After the second stage separated from the Falcon 9, they attempted to land the first stage of the Falcon 9 on the autonomous drone platform that's out in the Atlantic Ocean. And it seems that they were able to solve the problems of having enough hydraulic fluid to be able to maneuver the rocket correctly and not run out of it right before landing. However, we're not exactly sure what the cause of the failure was, but when it came into on that drone ship, it came in just a little bit too hard and tipped over and exploded. Here's the video of that.
So close. Don't. Oh.
So epic in itself, that explosion is epic in and of itself, and they're getting closer, they're getting a lot closer. Just from my observation of this video, it just seems like there was just too many course corrections right at the last second, and it makes me wonder if they need to do some sort of hover program, kind of like they did with the Grasshopper and the Falcon 9 dev programs, to be able to hover, stop at a hover first, and then come down for landing. I don't know, that's just my idea, but hopefully we'll have an official statement soon as to what the cause of this failure was, but according to a tweet that Elon Musk put out, there wasn't very much damage to that landing platform, so it'll only take minor repairs to be able to repair that. So thankfully, the barge wasn't destroyed too. So speaking of some rockets that are going to be landing under their own power, Ben, you have something cool to talk about for that, right? Yeah,
absolutely. So Blue Origin, additional tests, they've got their New Shepard spacecraft that they're going to be, they've kind of hinted at. See, the thing with Blue Origin, BO, is, wow. The thing with BO is that they don't really tell you.
You don't really know it's there until you smell it? Okay. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
They did it. They did it. All right, so the thing with BO is that they don't really give you much information until they're like set and done. So they've got their New Shepard spacecraft, which is basically a suborbital spacecraft. It's going to compete with the likes of, say, Virgin Galactic. You get about 5 minutes of weightlessness or so. It's about a 20-minute flight, something like that. You can see here's you got the crew capsule up top. I'm hand gestures as if you can see that. Crew capsule, see, crew capsule up top, propulsion module on the bottom, and they've. So with all of this, they've completed their development of the BE3 engine. That's their hydrogen engine, and that's important for this because it is a deep throttle engine. You can see kind of the engines on one of their old. This is like years old. Actually, I think we even have a video of like a years old test. There you go. So way old video stuff. But the new engine they're going to be putting in there, the BE3 engine, they've finished development of that, and it's going to be able to deep throttle, which is kind of important when you're landing because you want to bring it way, way down. And this is what's going to propel the crew and cargo capsule to altitudes of above 100 kilometers, which is kind of the generally accepted definition of where space begins. And so they're really making progress on all of this, and they're going to start. They said they're going to start additional testing later this year. So we're going to see more and more of these tests start to happen. So it's like they were, like their logo. We were looking at it earlier today. Their logo has like two tortoises pointing to the stars, right? So it's clearly, slow and steady wins the race kind of mentality. And that seems to be what they're doing, very slow and steady work on everything. So the BE3 engine, the hydrogen engine, and there's going to be able to throttle between full thrust of 110,000 pounds all the way down to 20,000 pounds. So it's a really deep throttle on that engine. And then they've also begun work on their BE4 engine, which is what United Launch Alliance wants to use in their Atlas 6, in their next generation rocket. So I'm just going to call it the Atlas 6 from now on, apparently.
Apparently.
Apparently. So there you go.
Until you hear otherwise. Is that better?
Yeah, and actually that leads us directly into our next story, which is it is not an Atlas 6, and it is not the next generation launch vehicle. Mike, what is it?
So far, they're calling it the Vulcan rocket, and there's a couple
so far, correct.
That's a very important point right there. Go ahead, Mike.
But this Vulcan rocket, there are a couple of really cool upgrades that they're planning on. First of all, it's going to be a 5-diameter rocket for the first stage, and the Atlas V is only 3.81 diameter. So it's actually the same size as the Delta IV, although the fuel tank is going to be a lot longer. And on that first stage, it's going to have anywhere from 0 to 6 solid rocket boosters to be able to give it additional thrust payload requirements that they might have. And then on the upper stage of that, they're going to initially use Centaur engines to power the upper stage, but eventually they want to make a new, what they're calling an advanced cryogenic upper stage. And with that, they want to have new type of turbo pumps. They want to use internal combustion engines that are made by a company that normally makes engines for Formula race cars. And they want to use those to be able to cycle through all the waste propellant that the upper stage produces when it's not firing its rocket engines and recycle that waste propellant back into the tank so that it can keep the tanks pressurized. It'll also be able to generate electricity and make it so that they could potentially start and restart those engines on the upper stage multiple times. And they're going to be contracting out for those engines, and they quite selected on whether they're going to use Aerojet Rocketdyne, X-Core, or even Blue Origin for the different rockets that they provide that they could use on an upper stage. So cool. I'm on board with their ideas for this rocket, and probably the coolest thing about this is they want to have at least partial reusability. What they want to do is the engines on the first stage, which, as you mentioned, are going to be built by Blue Origin, the 4 engine. What they want to do is they want to be able to detach those engines from the first stage after the second stage has already separated, and with those engines, it would be able to have an inflatable hypersonic pretty much heat shield to be able to protect it on its way back down. That heat shield would detach, and some drogue parachutes would deploy, followed by a parafoil that would be able to give it some glideability and maneuverability, and then it would be captured mid-air by a helicopter. And, you know, so it's kind of risky, but, and it seems like SpaceX kind of has the better plan with being able to reuse their entire stage. But at least according to Tori Bruno, 65% of their cost of the first stage is those engines. So being able to recover and hopefully reuse those engines would give them a lot of cost savings. And what they have quoted so far is that this Vulcan rocket would cost $100 million per launch, which, although is still more than SpaceX, it's significantly less than either the Atlas V or Delta IV in any of their configurations. So I, for one, am very happy to see United Launch Alliance taking their competition seriously and bringing their prices down, at least on this future rocket. We'll see if it'll still be called the Vulcan rocket in the future.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a infringement there with the Vulcan Aerospace guys, so we'll see what actually happens. You know, going back to our patrons of tomorrow, one of our new rewards will be to buy Space Mike a Ethernet cable long enough to get to his router and or new internet. Yeah, so we'll fix that up for future shows. All right, moving right along. It works.
That's what the Patreon is for. That's what the Patreon is for.
That's what Patreon is for. We'll get it fixed. We'll get it fixed. All right, moving right along. CARIANN?
NASA Moon Buggy Challenge.
You know, so multiple people sent this story to me, and I thought it was super lame. And then we started watching it, and you kind of get into it. All right, so what is it?
So, much as it sounds, it's the annual NASA Human Exploration Rover Challenge, which some people have been calling the Mars Rover Challenge, or Mars Buggy Challenge, if you will. Here's some footage from a little bit earlier today. This was taking place April 17th and 18th at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
Dude, look at him go right over that, just boom.
Yeah, right over
Everyone
that
else had to,
first
like, tug
obstacle.
over that obstacle, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really, really big one. This is a really, I like this particular configuration personally. But the idea is that teams are supposed to design, construct, test, and race human-powered rovers through an obstacle course that you are seeing here. Around 80 high school and college teams came from around 18 different states, and there are some international teams that included Germany, India, Mexico, and Russia. My understanding is that this is still being broadcast at the time, if I'm doing my time conversion correctly. The ceremony should take place, the award ceremony should take place around 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time.
Look at them book. Now watch, they're booking.
I know this team did really great.
They did really well up until
over a lot of different things. Yeah, I don't know if like some rocks got into some of their gear shifts or
like
what
right
was going
here.
on. Yeah,
like you'll see it just like stop hard.
Yeah, it's a little bit after this, I think. It's hard without the commentary. I'm so used to having the commentary. But yeah, right around here-ish. They were doing really good. They apparently,
oh, no.
There you go. the right out of the gate, that first sort of obstacle was a big one, and not just a big one, but I mean, it was a surprise one as well. They wanted to incorporate some Mars obstacles in this particular race, and that was a surprise to a lot of the buggy racers, which is a little unfortunate. This team did really great right out the gate, and then they got stuck here, and I'm not really sure actually what happened much after this, but
wheel got jammed up. Yep.
Yeah, wheel totally got jammed up. It is kind of interesting to see. I think any obstacle race is interesting personally, but maybe that's just me.
That's cool, actually, and it was high school and college students,
yeah.
and they had to build it and make it themselves,
yeah.
and you know, some of them made it out of like carbon fiber,
yeah,
and like themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of different
really
ramifications, or not ramifications. There's a lot of different qualifications. One of them is that they have to be able to fold up into a fairly neat
5 by 5 by 5 cube.
There you go, and sizable sort of configuration. So it's kind of a cool thing. I think it's interesting.
Yeah,
I'm glad we talked about it.
Other interesting things. Rocket Labs Limited. If you remember, we did an interview back in episode 7.24 with the CEO. I know, I added that in there for you guys.
That's good. I thank you for that.
They talked about the rocket and how it's going to be carbon composites and everything else.
Yes.
And we didn't talk a whole lot about the engine, but new information on the Rutherford engine has come out. First off, it's going to be primarily 3D printed. So that's cool in and of itself, right?
That is.
It's basically primarily all 3D printed components.
Very cool.
Cool, awesome. They can build it in about 3 days.
Wow.
So normally it takes several weeks, months, a long time to build an engine.
Right.
3 days to build one of these engines.
Yes.
But here's the thing that I think is really cool. Its turbopump is electric. It's not a gas jet. Yeah, I know. They've got a electric turbopump that drives its propulsion.
Okay.
It's powered by lithium-ion batteries. It's a brushless DC motor, and it's a little thing about the size of a Coke can that has about 50 horsepower. Now, I don't know if they have more than one of those going around. I don't know how many horses they need, but it's definitely smaller than one entire actual real horse driving.
Right.
What a dumb unit of measurement. We need to come up with something
anymore,
better than
for sure.
horsepower. Anyhow, the engine is capable of 4,600 pounds of thrust, and I would say at sea level or at
mountains.
No.
Mars?
Weightless, no, vacuum. Sea level or vacuum. However, with this engine, doesn't really matter that much. I'm like, it just brain just. The reason it doesn't matter is it's the same engine, the same Rutherford engine on the first and second stages of the vehicle. So it'll be really cool, right? So here you got kind of a printed. This is just a still picture.
Yeah, but it's awesome. Look at that. It's like a storm going on in the background.
The fuels are kerosene and liquid. When they say kerosene, I'm assuming they mean rocket propellant one, or at least a highly refined kerosene. Right. I don't think they're just going down to the gas station. Although maybe, I mean, who knows? And liquid oxygen, and they expect to. This is the part that's really awesome.
Yes.
This stuff is pretty real. They're going to begin test flights with the Electron rocket later this year. So I'm not talking 2 years out.
Wow.
Right, I'm talking later this year, and they expect to begin commercial launches next year.
Wow.
Boom, right?
Man.
And they've already got some legacy behind them, so it's not like they're just making this all from scratch. They actually have history in all of this. So great job. If you want to see more of the Electron rocket and that interview, again, episode 7.24 on tomorrow, we'll bring that up. But I think this is just a really cool rocket. I'm excited to see some of these small sats finally be able to go to space for not be the secondary payload on something, right? So they can actually kind of determine when they need to go up,
right,
and not have to spend an arm and a leg to go up either, right? So you can get a lot of these more small sat. That's going to open up a whole new industry, I think.
Totally.
Not just a launcher industry, but like a whole new space economy is going to open up with these small sats and these micro sats and these whatever else we're going to call them. It's going to be really interesting what we're able to do. All right, our last news story.
So. It's kind of sad this is the last one.
I give to the barista.
Because it should have kind of maybe gone back up the chain, but it doesn't really matter. Maybe you've heard that the coffee at the International Space Station sort of sucks, but it's getting better. Thanks to, actually, I was going to say it was thanks to a particular astronaut at Luca that mentioned that the coffee, the one thing that he really sort of missed while on the International Space Station was good coffee. But it was actually this particular espresso machine called the ISSpresso or the ISSpresso, depending on who you ask.
I call it the Expresso.
No, you do not, because nobody does. Nobody should. Is making its way or is at the International Space Station via Dragon. So, yay! Thanks SpaceX for that. It is about the size of a microwave, as you can see here. It uses a traditional pouch of water and then a very specific espresso capsule to brew the espresso. And it's from the Lavazza Coffee Company, which is also Italian. And they did this in collaboration with the Italy Space Agency. It also features, well, what also got delivered was 3D printed cups that kind of simulate pouring, which is kind of neat because you can sort of sip out of them. And it's been in nearly 3 years of development. So you can kind of see, there you go, the espresso sort of shooting into the bag there. You can, I guess you can just drink it out of that as well. The really cool thing, I don't know if you had the picture for it or not, but you can sort of set, this is what your typical barista would do, is that you would walk up and say, hey, I'd really like a short shot or a long shot or this, that, or the other. And this machine actually has the buttons for it. And it's completely contained. It's totally leak proof, which is a proprietary thing for them, which is kind of a cool thing. Lavazza, for people who are not familiar, is actually like a 100-year-old company. Has been doing coffee forever. And it's just a really cool thing. And it's kind of neat. Now you can have espresso on the International Space Station.
I'm going to loop this around to another previous episode.
Yes.
It is kind of neat, but you have to drink, the way you drink that espresso is through a straw.
Yes, but you can get it from the bag, you can get it into these specifically designed coffee cups.
Okay, that's where I was going to go.
Sort of look like these weird pedally things. They look extremely inappropriate, I'm going to be very honest.
I don't want to drink my coffee through a straw.
Right, but
I don't think most of the astronauts do either.
Right, there's a similar plug on the bottom of them. It almost looks like a suction cup. I had to sort of really look at it carefully, where you can then get the espresso from the bag to the cup, the very inappropriate looking cup, and then drink it that way, which is a thing. Because you would want to sip. You'd want to sip espresso. You don't want to be slurping it out of a...
Right, and that brings us back to episode 8.10, which was just 2 episodes ago with Sam of...
Sam Canaglio.
Yeah, with Cosmic Lifestyle, which is talking about some of these things where you don't want to sip your coffee through a straw. Right. You want to be able to drink them through... Right, you want to be able to smell it.
Not to mention something like this is going to be very hot.
And it will be very hot, and that would suck through a straw.
It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that way.
Before we go to break, I'd like to toss back to Space Mike and ask him what space pods we can kind of expect to see coming up this next week. Space Mike.
Well, first off, on Monday, Ariel Waldman is going to be talking about the most distant exoplanet that's been discovered. And not a dwarf planet in our solar system, but exoplanet in another solar system. So, and Lee also is going to be talking about some ISS experiments. And as for me, I kind of have a couple of different plans that I'm always in depending on what happens in the news this coming week. So if it's a slow week, then I'm going to be talking about animals in space as well as the Indian space program, the ISRO. And from there, we'll kind of see if I push those back depending on what happens in the news. There's always something crazy happening that sometimes you don't get forewarning for. But as for now, that's the plan for next week.
Awesome. Sounds great, Space Mike. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, comments from last week's show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
We've always looked to the stars. They guide us, give us comfort, help us find our way. We see ourselves out there, When we look up, it inspires us. And we long for something we don't yet know. We yearn to go there. So, we venture forth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not.
Many think we stopped exploring. But we know our journey didn't end. We've only just begun.
Orion is functioning perfectly at this point.
Come with us and explore tomorrow.
And welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get into viewer comments from last week's show, I did it again. I moved the mug, and the internet has a drinking game out of me every time I touch the mug and don't take a drink out of it.
Well,
and
then you should touch it a whole lot then.
I have been trying to not do that.
What was it Jack Bauer did? Damn it, damn it, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. A huge thank you to all of our patrons of Tomorrow who have to make this specific episode happen. These are the Patreon Plus subscribers. They've contributed $2.50 or more to this specific episode. And they will get access to After Dark as soon as it is available online. But wait, there's more. If you contribute even 1 penny per episode, that would be 4 cents per month, you get your name in the show as well. These are our patron subscribers that contributed 1 penny up to $2.49 US. To find out how you can help contribute to the show, head over to patreon.com/TMRO. And again, if you prefer those space pods and you want to contribute to those are over at patreon.com/spacepod. I will say the space pods cost radically more than the live shows do. So when you're doing that, if you can't really decide which one to go for, I would urge you over towards the space pods. And remember, you can set a monthly maximum as well. So we don't go over a budget that you set. So if we release 1 million space pods in a week, by the way, Mike, you now have to release 1 million space pods in 1 week. If we do that,
every word is a new pod. Ready, go.
Every word's a new pod. You won't get charged $1 million, right? You set that upper limit to $10, and you can choose to. They'll email you beforehand, and you can say, "Oh no, I want to change my pledge" and stuff like that. All right, let's go ahead and get started with some comments from last week's show. First up, or not last week's show, 2 weeks ago. My bad.
Yes, from the last show.
From the last show.
Yes,
Internet.
This comes from the Tabasco.
A regular commenter. Kudos to the Tabasco for having high quality comments that we can bring on the show week after week. So there you go.
Good way of wording that.
Now zoom again.
From the Tabasco, I believe the CRS-6 launch to be as significant as the moon landing. The reusable first stage will revolutionize space even greater than Apollo.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting comment. It's hard for us to comment on that ourselves too much, but I would say that Apollo changed humanity entirely.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was the first time a human had stepped on an alien body.
Yeah.
This is not to say that what SpaceX is doing isn't important. It is. But Apollo forever marked humanity.
Yeah, and the world watched Apollo.
The world watched Apollo. Yeah, so I would just say we didn't grow up with Apollo. We weren't around for Apollo, so it's less impactful for us. But I don't think we should underestimate the impact and change to everything that happened in our lives, our lives, because of Apollo. So there you go. All right, next up.
This one comes from
you pronounce this.
cage?
Anode cage.
Anode cage?
Anode cage.
Anode cage. All right, I can see that now. Yeah.
And zoom.
Oh, wow. So sorry, Soren. Look, tomorrow at Cop Sub engine test today for the BPM-2 test engine. Follow the live stream. Open source space adventure.
Yeah, I know. I love Copenhagen suborbitals. Obviously, we missed it everyone in the live show. But those guys are the brilliant kind of crazy.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are going to send someone into space inside of like a little can with their homemade rocket engines. And it is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And if you go back like even 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago, I would have been like, nope, not going to happen. And now I'm totally like, absolutely, they're going to do this.
It's true.
No, right?
Even when we thought they weren't going to do it, we were like, but it's cool anyway.
Well, yeah, they made their own submarine. These guys are awesome. So, and they ran their engine test. We didn't include it in Space News, but yeah, kudos to the Copenhagen suborbital guys. I think what they're doing is freaking fantastic, and I hope we see more of that.
Yes.
I hope we see more citizen space happening. I think citizen space is kind of what will help open up the space frontier. It's one of the elements. There are many elements to that, and I think that's one of them.
They have a swag store now.
Copenhagen suborbital has a swag store?
Yeah.
Where can people
I don't
go
have
buy?
the URL memorized. We can put it in the show notes.
Or I hope I don't forget, but that's awesome. All right,
Okay.
we need to buy some Copenhagen some Cop Sub stuff and wear it on the show.
Yes,
All right,
agreed. Comes from Bobbert for him off of YouTube.
Another regular commenter.
Yes.
Who, again, good quality comments. Thank you for that.
No screens, no, what am I trying to say? Avatar.
No avatar, yes. For shame.
Says, you kids were positively loopy today. That's part of the charm. Don't ever change. BTW, that's, by the way, no acronyms. Have a happy Yuri's night.
So I wanted to point out two things, several things, I suppose, not just two. First off, thank you for using the no acronym policy. And I screwed up. I said core IP earlier in the show, and I didn't say what IP was, which is intellectual property. Yeah, it's a universal term, and I said core IP. I forgot to say intellectual property. So there needs to be we need an acronym jar.
Ooh,
right?
Yeah.
An acronym jar that sits on the table, and
Yep.
you got to put $1 in every time you use an acronym, and
Yep.
don't explain it right then and there.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun addition to the show. And the reason we do that, and I think this is important, is we want the show to be inclusive.
Yeah.
And rocket science has a tendency to be exclusive. It has a tendency to use acronyms that mere mortals can't understand. And heck, even when you're in the rocket industry, sometimes you're swimming in acronyms and not understanding
because
what all these things are.
what you're trying to do is you're trying to shorten up the. You don't want to have to say the, I can't even think of a good acronym at the moment.
The COTS, what is the cuckoo? The COTS.
Right? Exactly. You don't want to have to say European Space Agency every single time you're talking about ESA.
Right. So
Straight up.
that's why we will explain the acronym, and then we can use the acronym.
Yes.
But you have to explain it because we want to make
Yes.
sure that you guys have a good foundation. And there are a lot of rocket scientists in the show that know this, and they're like, why waste the time saying the European Space Agency? But there are a lot of people who are brand new to the show.
Yes.
And maybe they're just now getting back into space geekery.
Yes.
And so it's important to me that they understand what we're talking about, and we don't speak in rocket geek. And we do our best to do the shows in plain English and not geek. Sometimes you have to do a little geek, right? It's a really hard balancing act, but that's what we try to do. Also, positively loopy today, quirky. We like to have fun in the show. We are not a suit and tie show. There are plenty of those on the internet, and if you want that, that's awesome. That's fine. There are tons that you can go find. We like to have a more personal experience with you. Sometimes we're going to just have more fun with it. And it says, that's part of the challenge. Don't ever change. That's the only thing that I will take issue at. We will always be changing. We will always be trying something new. Sometimes things will work. Usually they will not work, but that's how we learn and find the cool things.
It was in reference to the...
I know. Just that phrase. I don't like that phraseology. Don't ever change. You should always be changing. You should always be working on getting things better. And don't be afraid of failing. We try different things on the show all the time. We fail all the time. But where we succeed, we keep it. We integrate it into the show. And I think the show becomes better because of that. I know that's not what Bobbert for him meant.
Yep.
I know I'm admitting that.
Okay.
But I'm still taking issue with the phraseology.
Awesome.
Warbles a lot. Warbles a lot, I got to say. You are hard to decipher.
Want to know why? Warbles a lot.
Not just this comment. I'm reading Warbles a lot. Comments on a lot of our videos. Just in general.
Yes.
I have to sit there and think about what Warbles a lot is saying. All right. What?
This time, Warbles a lot said.
Cohesively, mind you.
You're doing well. Try to keep the main show and the spice pods if you can manage it. I just figured that was
just 1-to-1. That's exactly what it was.
That was just written in an accent. I'm gonna guess that Warbles is Australian.
It's a spice pod.
Maybe Benny Stoge knows who Warbles a lot is.
I will say, it is not us who does the space pods. All of the credit for that goes to our correspondents. We've got Ariel, we've got Space Mike, and we've got Lisa right now. We're bringing on more correspondents in the future as well. I love the space pods also. I thought that the space pods would be kind of our answer to space news, and we'd remove space news from the live shows, and they would be inserted into space pods. But that's not what's happening, and that's okay. What's happening is we're getting this great kind of extra evergreen content from everyone, talking about interesting things that I want them to keep talking about.
Yeah.
So thus far, we have not removed news from the live show because I can't, because that's so maybe.
But that's okay.
That's okay. Maybe we'll break the news section out and do a different show. I don't know what we're going to do. I feel like the interview show should be an interview show with some comments, and space news feels shoehorned in there now. But maybe I'm wrong. So thank you. The plan is to keep the space pods, but it is important that they can fund themselves. Right now, they are absorbing all of the money from the live shows, and that is fine to begin with. But we need to get about $100 per space pod. It's actually about $120 per space pod for them to completely break even, right? So when you consider that we're doing 20 of those per month, that adds up real fast. So if you like the space pods, please consider contributing over at patreon.com/spacepod, singular spacepod. And that will help us. That will help us go. We're about a quarter of the way there. So our first goal is at $100. We're at 25 or so right now. And finally, this is a new tradition I'm thinking of starting on the show, and I think it's you got to let me know if this is lame or awesome. Here's the last comment of the show.
This one comes from Ashley Laura Foroff of Twitter saying, "Lobster season starts tomorrow."
Has nothing to do with the show.
No,
Someone
nothing.
just used TMRO. This happens all the time.
All the time.
I'm sifting through
It's
comments,
hilarious.
and it's like everyone who just says TMRO. So I figured I'd just start sliding random TMRO comments into the show. All right, that's our show. What's happening next week? You're doing the interview next week.
Oh yeah, we interviewing. I gotta get her last name right because I screwed it up before. It's Hannah Kerner, who is the national chair of SEDS, which is
the students
for the Exploration Development of Space.
There you go.
I don't owe $1.
You don't owe $1. I think that would be fun. I think we need the acronym jar sitting on the table.
It has to be cool looking though.
That's coming up next week. That will be happening at our new location. And for our patrons,
Were you about to give them the address?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, it's still a home studio. That hasn't changed. So it's happening at our new location. The set will be changing, so we'll be showing our patrons. They'll be getting a sneak peek of all of that. So all of the patrons of tomorrow, if you're a patron, you'll be getting a sneak peek at what it's all going to look like. I hope you guys enjoy it. I think it'll be a set under construction for like, what do you think, 6 months?
Easy.
Like forever. Like it will never be done. So all right, that's our show this week. After Dark's up next. Thank you so much for watching.